Hello! Back in LSF Phase 1, there was a discussion about making a tier list of each technical you could complete when responding. I said I'd make one, but never got around to it. But I don't want to leave any promises unfulfilled, so let's do it right now. And we might as well also throw in the Phase 5 and Finale technicals too. I'll be ranking each technical based on how worth it I think they are. So basically, if you can seamlessly weave the tech into the response, then it's worth it. But if it makes your response look like this, then I am gonna ignore tech maxing responses since those would have a completely different tier list. So I'm only considering responses that actually resemble responses, and how worth it each tech is for those. Alright, enough yapping, let's get the show on the road. F tier. These are the technicals that I classify as literally impossible. You cannot complete these technicals under any circumstance. There is only one technical in F tier. So Nana Donut 1 states, remember to not leave your permission on, anyone can edit, you dumb fuck. I cluelessly tried to complete this technical because hey, I didn't leave any permissions on. But no, this is a technical that only Leah can complete, the one who makes all the sheets. And she isn't a contestant, and so the boost is unachievable, outside of our collective grasp, taunting us for what could have been. Is this what you wanted, Nad? Is it? Yeah, it probably is. Good bit. E tier. Though these technicals are definitely completable, I personally don't think it's ever worth doing so. You're better off looking elsewhere to get your fix. B3 will immediately teach you about two recurring trends on this tier list. The first is that techs at level 3 generally aren't worth it, because completing them usually takes more effort than the previous levels. And because the maximum boost doesn't increase, it's kinda pointless anyway. Second is that it's a lot easier to complete Phase 5 techs than Phase 1 techs, because in Phase 5, you had 3 whole comic panels to work with, while in Phase 1, you only have one 100 character response. So keeping that in mind, why would you make each word in your response consist of 4 letters or less, if the I text reward having multiple letters, the O text reward reaching a certain character threshold, and the V text reward literally the opposite of B3? I'd rather complete those 3 instead of B3. As for C2 and C3, one rule I keep in mind when responding is that if the response can be submitted to concise WoW, I should probably edit it. So having to go below 50 or 30 characters is blasphemy. And again, having less characters gives you less opportunities to do other texts. E2 prevents you from using certain vowels. But again, if you're trying to complete other texts, then you're gonna want some of those vowels. And if you want E3, then the only response you can submit is hymns, sight by my spry rhythms, fly by stry my fry. Good luck with that. All of the Fs are down here because R, S, and T on their own already appear in so many words. If you only had to avoid one of them, then F1 would have been fine, but banning the majority of plurals is a death sentence. Verbose Trowers would never use articles after all. I5 is the only I down here because having 1000 words to work with might seem like a lot, until you realize it's close to impossible to get Avocado 1, B group, E group, F group, I group, L1, M1, Meow 1, Meptune 1, N1, O2, Pfish 1, R group, S group, V group, X4, or X5 alongside it. Being roped into the I group instead of standing on its own as well makes it a no-go. In round 3 it was tied with E3 for the second least amount of completions, behind V3. I think this might genuinely be the least worth it tech out of all of them. Yeah, I think having to limit yourself to the top 1000 most common English words is somehow even worse than needing your response to be the exact same when translated into simplified Chinese, which is what Meowie1 asks. I'd say this was very doable in round 2 because you could simply submit your response in simplified Chinese, which is especially great when combined with text like L1. But it got patched in round 3, forcing the response to be mostly English, so it became more difficult to do the longer your response was. B3 might not deserve to be all the way down here, but not having any periods or commas to work with completely ruins the flow of a response. It's great for tech maxing though. I expected reusing words from previous responses to not be so difficult, but I really struggled finding even 3 words to fit my response, though I was able to do it in rounds 2 and 3. But 8 for R3? No thank you. S2 makes you write a haiku, which is nice. Unfortunately, only having 17 syllables to work with is not a lot, so getting text in groups I, R, and O is really difficult if you're making a haiku. It's also mutually exclusive with O3, which requires 25 syllables. X2 and X3 round off the Phase 1 side of E tier, because it's hard to make a coherent response with less than 11 unique letters. Since these texts are the opposite of the I group, I'd say go for I instead. Now regarding Phase 5, we won't see that many of those texts down here, because comics give you a lot more space to work with, and so it's usually worth it to do most texts. But not Meowie1 round 1, which limits that usually large amount of room to just 100 characters. It's difficult to tell a story if you've only got one response worth of characters, and so Meowie was the only one who did their own tech, and they sadly placed low. Joining it is Pikaman 3 round 1, which absolutely no one, not even Pika, fulfilled. So I guess you could call it a bait technical. The one who makes the bait tag isn't actually gonna do it themselves. They were simply made to fool other people into doing so. Not only would your comic look horrendous if it was only made of watermarked or non-transparent images, most booksonas are already in a transparent format, so you'd have to purposefully make them not transparent if you want to do this tech. Nuh-uh. D tier are the technicals that I label high effort. Either it's slightly more worth it to bend your responses around them, or they were submitted by people who just want to watch the world burn. Maptune 1 is a great example of the latter, because not only does every middle letter have to form a real word, it also implies that every word needs to have an odd amount of letters, both of which combined are a pain to achieve. Props to ITOD for doing what's probably the only successful attempt at this. So I actually did try Clover 1, but around 7,000 messages in, I realized I was in a sunk cost fallacy and stopped. To my surprise, there were actually a lot of people who pulled this off, so good on ya for having the perseverance. Still in D tier for me though. I originally had Art 2 alongside R3 in E tier, but apparently a lot of people completed this one, even more than responding early. So yeah, I guess if you do this one first, then you can probably build the rest of the response around the words you choose. I did a test run of Chef Showdown on my own to see if I could complete Tonya 1, but yeah, no, I didn't even get close. If I remember correctly, TR and Random cheesed this by playing in a squad with people who weren't contestants in the Endless WoW server. Also in the round before that, this tech was very cheesable as, again, TR proved with his custom-made game. But besides those exceptions, this one's hard to complete. V3 holds the record for the least completions in round 3, which is because making every word in your response 8 letters or more leads to a verbose overdose, as they say. And finally for phase 1, X1 is once again pretty hard to the D letter limit. But I chose to stick it in D tier instead of E tier, because ever since I saw Gizmo respond with Sit, insists it's a sin, I'm animist, as assassinates Mats, insists Zigitwao, I have been reformed. As for phase 5, Cyclo 2 round 1 is another one of those bait decks, since Cyclo didn't do it either, only DTTB did. But since DTTB didn't flop or anything, I wouldn't say it's never worth it. Hell, I actually tried doing this one also. I had a whole speech prepared for Fred that perfectly followed this technical, until I realized that I used some 5-letter words that Pika Man 1 round 1 banned, and so I had to scrap the whole thing. God. Now, while I have been saying that some of these texts were bait, I don't actually know for sure because I never asked the original creators if they are. I'm just assuming. But Arnoop 2 round 2 is a proper bait by yours truly. I was never planning on making my own comic monochrome. It makes comics look boring. Cyclo and DTDB did do it though, and they placed last and second to last, ignoring Dawn's filler. Teehee. But I actually did vote Cyclo's comic up very high, so I'd say it still has its merits. Cyclo 2 round 2 is a proper high-effort tactical, and again, Cyclo didn't do it himself. Only getting to use words with an odd amount of letters means that every piece of dialogue needs to be written with this in the back of your head. And if you need a specific word that's even, then tough luck. I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it because both Markiplier and Mark are even. So depending on what your comic is about, your dreams might be shut down right away. Only DTDB and Meowie did this tech and placed low, but I'd say Meowie actually pulled it off very well, cause I didn't even notice the strange word choices while voting, so that's why it's not lower. Pika Man 1 round 2 is similarly limiting, but this time it's about where the comic can take place, since the setting has to be plot relevant. It's one of those techs you have to design your comics around, so if you already had a different idea, it wasn't gonna work. Pika, TR and TOT did pull it off pretty well though, and then DTDB fell into the totally obvious bait of using Andre the Giant. I haven't actually talked about any finale technical yet, and that's because I wouldn't say that any of them are never worth it. We had 3 responses to work with, which is plenty of room to do pretty much all of them. There were only 2 I didn't do, and 2 of them that were out of my control. First up on the chopping block is F3 Finale, made by TR. Despite TR being the only one who did this tech on one of his responses, it was his lowest scoring one. The loss of information is a bit too much when getting rid of 3 whole words. C2 Finale, made by a literal tree, is similar to a tech in the first phase, which had you including the name of a contestant, but including someone's username is a lot more difficult. Now you can't just say avocado, you have to say avocado exists. Scary stuff, I tell ya. C6 Finale, made by Charito, makes me do math. Unacceptable, instant downvote. Anyways, using each character in your response 66% of the way through your response is difficult to do if your response isn't very long. So I only did it on my very long response, and it was indeed the only response that had it. C8 Finale, made by Cyclo, is one I struggled a lot with when trying to fit it into my tech maxing response, and I'd say it's largely responsible for the way the first 8 words were worded. Apparently the other 2 also had similar struggles. And no, I did not use a synonym for buttocks on purpose, it just happened to work out that way, I swear. C18 Finale, made by Pika Man, is like the central piece of my long response. I put every word used in the prompts into a document and made sure to highlight very long words or words that used uncommon letters, so that I could get more text and the verbosity badge. It was pretty fun to put the puzzle pieces together, but my response came out very clunky, because I couldn't change any words to fit the necessary grammar. No one else attempted it either. C22 finale, made by SMA, is the other tech in the finale that I willingly didn't do, besides DRs. And neither did anyone else. Dang. It's similar to Pika's in that you can only use words from a certain source, but requires a lot more searching due to Zun's large discography. Unfortunately, I already had plans for all 3 of my responses that didn't allow for this one to be used. Sorry SMA, if I had a 4th response, not including the comic, I'd do it. I'll listen to Bad Apple while working on the script to make up for it. C24 finale made by Twiggy, hold on, give me a second. This tech has sucked the soul out of my lifeless corpse. Oh my god! What does any of this even mean? I DM'd Twiggy multiple times about this because it genuinely stumped me. But during the last couple hours before the voting deadline, I finally figured out a Sudoku for my long response. With Twiggy's help, I realized that you can take any 17 glue grid online, but after experimenting a bunch on my own, I realized that these numbers don't actually matter. You can replace each number with another number, as long as you do the same if the exact same number appears anywhere else. I swear, it was mind-blowing. It was my urethra moment. S2 finale, made by Blaster, isn't really hard, but it asking you to include 2 words and 3 emojis makes it take up a lot of real estate, controlling the vibe of your response. That's why it's probably best to not complete this one too much. But it does give you some agency in deciding which words to use, so it's not too bad. In any case, I can understand Theody not going for it. And finally for D tier, S5 finale, made by Jumatalk, is a little bit ambiguous in my opinion. Write about awkward aardvarks. What does write about mean? I don't know how to write. I just slam my face against the keyboard until it creates a response. I thought that's how everyone else did it. While of course it's talking about a joke from Gary Trow, you could also use its ambiguousness against it, which I did in my tech maxing response by claiming that the aliens are riding on aardvarks. Theody simply claimed that the aliens in his response were aardvarks. Sure, why not? That potentially moves this tech all the way into S tier, but I'll keep it down here because you'd have to include the aliens in your response if you want to do that. Moving on to C tier. These technicals are situational. If you have the opportunity to take them, then take them. Otherwise, maybe try going for a different one instead. Trowers are known procrastinators, so our noob 1 tries to find out what happens when that behavior is punished. We should destroy the person who made this deck. Who would be so cruel? Yeah, responding within 24 hours after the prompt was posted is really difficult if you're trying to get a lot of text, because chances are you have other stuff to do. Even allowing some small edits won't save this technical, because then we'd have to literally solve a Greek myth. Avocado 1 forces you to include one of 10 countries in your response. Usually I'd say that having to include a specific word isn't that bad, but these ones are so specific that they limit the amount of directions you can take your response in, unless the prompt is unusually good for it. But I mean, it kind of was in round 2. B2 is a lot higher up than B3, because there's a pretty big difference between words with 4 letters or less and 6 letters or less, which you can also see here with the boost having a massive drop between B2 and B3. With 6-letter words, you can make responses that sound very normal. I didn't even notice that some of these completed B2 before I thoroughly checked them. Still a little limiting though, of course. O3 is a little finicky. I only went for this tech in round 2 because I was already close to 25 syllables, so I just had to tweak the response a little. I'm not sure if it's worth going for if you aren't already close to it after making your response. V2, just like V3, ruins the flow of your response a bit thanks to its verbosity. I tried to stack this with B1 in round 1 by staying between 6 and 8 characters for every word, but it's pretty difficult, so I didn't bother doing that afterwards. Snide V2 round 1, not mentioning your chosen holiday, seems easy if you look at everyone who did it, but keep in mind that Theody and I both failed TR's loophole check because of it, and nobody knew what Meowies or DTDB's comics were about, so Leah had to tell us. That leaves CR as the only one who actually used this tech to great effect. So that's why I'd say it's situational. If it's very clear which holiday or tradition it's referring to, then it's great, but if it's not, then it isn't. And in this case it usually wasn't, because TR1 round 1 made us pick stuff that was more obscure. ITOD 1 round 2 is one that in any other circumstance I would rank higher than this, but in specifically this round, I made you spam the same image 100 times, DTDB made you get a crowd of 20 different characters, and Pika made you choose a location with not a lot of things to stand on. But I guess the joke is on us, because everyone else besides us actually did do the tech. Although Theody and TR did it because the characters are literally flying. I like this tech though, it's very creative. Pikaman 2 round 2 is here because it looks deceptively easy. There have been so many Eurovision songs that there's bound to be something that fits your dialogue. But unless you have extensive knowledge about all of these songs, good luck sifting through them all to find what you want. I believe all 3 of the people who did it used songs from mostly the most recent one, because it'd be too time consuming otherwise. There's Twice, twice, all of which were performed in 2024. It's not too difficult, but it does make the characters in your comic yap a lot more. And I guess we were all too cowardly to include Nendas Narkotikumidas Aitiame Kulmidagi. And rounding off this tier's Phase 5, we've got TR1 Round 3. We haven't seen any Phase 5 Round 3 texts before, which is mostly because they're all worth 8% apiece. That's quite a bit. It's the reason why I chose to not worry about the quality of my comic that round, and instead get as many of them as possible. It's also why all of them are B tier or higher, except for this one. It was completed the least, tied with TR3, and I get why. Having to reuse a panel from an old comic severely limits the amount of directions you can take your comic in, and might accidentally ruin your chances of getting ITOD2 or Pikaman 1. Nevertheless, I went with the last panel in DTDB's first comic, and had to make up for the 2 A's by putting 2 Gyats at the end. You gotta do what you gotta do. As for the finale text, first up is C5 Finale, made by Bubble Trumps. It's the exact same tech as B2, so the same applies, and it was a central part of my tech maxing response. C7 Finale, made by Claire, is also similar to a Phase 1 tech. It's basically 03, but a lot easier since you don't have to be spot on, and instead can go lower than 25. C15 Finale, made by Nad, is definitely a Nad technical alright. The caps words were probably intended for comedic effect, but most of us used it in conjunction with Blaster's tech to emphasize how fabulous we are. It's in C because the attention it attracts might not always be worth it, just like Blaster's. C19 Finale, made by Quetzal, is one that probably would have fit more as a comic technical, similarly to Meowie's Backdoor test, which we'll see later on. A lot of the time, regular responses don't have any characters as opposed to comics, so you'll need to make sure that the actions in the response are performed by a specific character, like Masked Oracle for example. Gotta say though, 15 words is not a lot to go through a whole character arc to pass the Makomori test. S3 Finale, made by Catworld, requires you to put a word originating from a Semitic language in your response. There was once again something similar to this in Phase 1, but it allowed all languages, while S3 Finale limits you to Arabic, Hebrew, and maybe Amharic. The other Semitic languages don't have a lot to work with. It's also how I learned that the word artichoke comes from Arabic, and I was very tempted to use it for obvious reasons, but it didn't really fit anywhere. S4 Finale, made by Shaggy, is one I was kind of surprised that I was the only one that did it. Changing the last 5 words to lead speak isn't hard to do, but I imagine the reason why my fellow finalists didn't complete it is because it interferes with some other texts for which you need vowels, like Cyclos or Eurykims. I remember having to fine-tune the first 8 words of my tech maxing response so that the last 5 words could be put into lead speak and still have my amount of words be a prime number. Thankfully, it did make other texts a lot easier, such as S17 Finale, made by ZX. A 10-letter substring without vowels would have been pretty difficult, but since Shaggy's tech got rid of the vowels anyway, I kinda cheesed it. The other two played by the rules though, and I quite like what they came up with. B tier is where things finally get good. These texts are often worth going for because altering your response around them isn't that costly. C1 is one which I initially wrote off as bad for the same reasons as its other levels, because less space equals less opportunities to get texts. But since going for level 1s was usually worth it since the nerf to upper levels, I think it's not a bad idea to be concise. It also makes it easier to get O2, since you're not making your response overly long, and it worked well for me in round 3. Now, if only I also submitted good responses to Concise Trial. E1 is similarly limiting, but is probably worth going for anyway to get the level 1 boost. Then there's also the profound disappointment you'd feel if you don't do this tech, because you'll never be as cool as ZX, making it more desirable to do it. I2 and I3 are two of the main reasons why the X technicals rank so low, cause why go for less unique letters when you can go for more unique letters? Personally, I completed I2 every time, because a thesaurus is usually enough to get the last couple letters you need. I3 on the other hand is one I dropped in round 3 after having done it in the previous 2 rounds, because I admit that it can be tedious to get every single letter. I still rank it this high up because almost nobody did this technical, and thus you can get a large boost from it. If I had to guess, I3 probably gave me the largest boost in both rounds 1 and 2. I4 is under the same group but is different, in that you must include some types of words. You'll probably have nouns, verbs and adjectives without even trying, and adverbs and prepositions aren't that hard to add. But to copy the conservative rhetoric for a sec, the pronoun is the main problem. A lot of them are short, so no B3, have the letter E, so no E1, and are often present in the top 1000 most used English words, so no X5. I literally used the word thou in my round 3 response to avoid all of those problems. And it's not even grammatically correct in the sentence because it means you and not your. I sure am glad that there weren't any participants from 1300s England to catch that. And 1 is not that bad, because some contestants have names that are just words, like clover and avocado. Personally, I use Quetzal and crazy. It's usually one of the first texts I thought of when making my response. The word Quetzal was the main inspiration for my round 2 response, for example. And as a last resort, you can always just claim that the TR substring refers to TR. Also, thank you Random for putting me in your response that one time. I still don't know exactly what this means, but I am honored. Everyone can do O1 and O2 because almost every single mini-trial trains you on making 100 character or 10 word responses. O2 is especially good because it pairs up well with texts that want you to be a bit more concise. O1 is slightly worse because it means you automatically fail C1, but if you don't want C1, then going to the maximum amount of characters gives you a lot of room to work with. It's not that hard to be on the dot, because you can edge towards 100 characters with emojis, punctuation marks, or alternative spellings. R1 is like R2 and R3 but a lot more doable, and you want a level 1 tech anyway. You have to go out of your way to find words from previous responses to include that don't mess up any other text you're going for, but since it's only 3, it ain't that bad. Pikaman 2 round 1, despite being one that Pika didn't do, is actually pretty worth it in my opinion. Most dialogue naturally has each character speak a similar amount, as Cyclo, Meowie, and DTB show. TR1 Round 1 is a great tech to diversify the kinds of comics that will be submitted, but because of that it is the very first tactical you have to make a decision on. It probably would have been higher up on the list because it doesn't really limit your potential that much, and only makes you think about more unique solutions to the prompt, but when combined with Snivy 2 however, it becomes a lot more deadly. Having to pick something more obscure and then not saying what it is likely what led to some comics being a little confusing. Still though, it's not that hard to fulfill on its own. Cyclo 1 Round 2, inspired by Cyclo's comic in Round 1, makes the backgrounds of some panels a little different than what you might have wanted them to be. But in the end, you can easily find a suitable replacement for what you were planning. All I needed was a building after all. I don't know anything about mainstream music besides every European's unhealthy Eurovision obsession, so I have no idea where the others hit theirs, though you can clearly see DDDBs and Meowies. TR1 Round 2 is one that I'm really surprised many people didn't do. A TDQ initial can be pretty difficult, since Q isn't a very common letter, but all the letters in Leah's, Solar, and Flare are. I do feel like I did it pretty poorly, but Cyclo's was really good. I did not catch that during voting. And TR's is apparently so good that I don't even know where it is. Like, genuinely, I cannot find it. Like, I've gone as far as looking at these books to see if their names initialize to any of those words. I am going insane. ITOD2 Round 3 is the opposite, because I'm surprised so many people did do it. In fact, only I and Nerdy Gal's filler didn't complete it. I think that a lot of the humor in these comics comes from using avatars of people who are well known by the voters. And to me that usually means other LSF contestants. I'm gonna be honest, I don't remember a single thing from the original Carry Trow, but I don't know, maybe that's just a me issue. It's still pretty high up though, cause if the comic doesn't need a specific character to make a joke, then you can easily just use Carry Trow contestants to pass the tech. Or you can be a genius like Pikaman and use Leah, because she was mentioned in another tech, which technically counts. TR continues his trend of trying to make comics more culturally diverse with TR2 Round 3. I imagine the reason why not many people did this one either is because it takes up space in a comic that will be pretty much useless, since no one will understand what the character is actually saying. It's hard to simply weave that into the comic effortlessly. Unless you're me, of course, I'm the best. T4 Finale, made by Avocado, requires you to make art with one specific color and grayscale. This tech aligns quite well with other techs, like for Cat World you can take orange or lime, for Idiotes you can take sandy brown or sandy top, you get the idea. Here's my art with the color scheme I had to use. Looks incredible, right? C14 Finale, made by Normal Ben, presumably inspired by a similar rule in Impossible Stupid Dumb Trow, demands you compliment an alumnus. It's easy to do so in Stupid Dumb Trow, cause all you have to do is put a message in the channel, but putting it in an actual response could be more difficult. But since there are ways to play around it, mostly by using TR over and over again, you can get it, as long as you put in a word that could be a compliment later. C20 Finale, made by Reed, is another tech that's made easier by the existence of Shaggy's and Dedex's techs, since both kinda encompass it completely. I respect TR's space between Hyro and Glyphs to complete it. C21 Finale, made by Snivy, is the first finale tech on the list that applies to all of your responses. Usually they ask you to do something external, which is why they're so high up, but this one doesn't, instead asking for a double pangram between all 3 of your responses. You're rewarded for including as many letters as possible anyway, cause there's a badge that asks you to do so as well, so you might as well go for it. S7 Finale, made by Leah's mom, reduces your word limit from 15 to 13 in practice. Although you could also make your response 11 words long if you want to go lower but still have the amount be a prime number. Not too difficult. S9 Finale, made by MGR, also makes me do math. Eek. I had to ask a question to make sure I did the math correctly, but I'm proud of myself for getting it right. Big accomplishment for me. Anyway, if you submit your response at 1 minute before midnight, your character limit becomes 108 characters, which is even more than what you usually get, so I'll take that any day. But I am an agent of big snoozing, so I submitted my tech maxing response a couple hours earlier with a slightly lower character limit so that I could catch some Z's. I needed those for Snivy's tech after all. A 16 finale made by Joachim is a good way to add 4 extra characters in case you want the verbosity badge, which I ended up using it for. It's not hard to do per se, but it conflicts with techs like Shaggy's or Bubble Jumps's, which is why I only used it once. Alright, now moving on to A tier. Wait, what? Why is there another tier between B and A? Arnoop, what the fuck is wrong with you? So this is the RNG tier, and as the name implies, there are 4 techs here that are pretty much out of your control. First is Snivy 1 Round 1, which punishes you if you share a holiday with another player. Like I said, TR1 definitely helped with diversifying each response, so in the end everyone was able to fulfill this tech by using different holidays or traditions. But it did have the potential to be a lot more devastating. S1 finale, made by Aqueducts, is only obtainable if you make Leah laugh with a response. I got one, Teody got another, and then Leah also gave it to herself. Host bias? In my TWOW? Leopard Sun is cancelled. S11 finale, made by Trojan, is only given to the player with the highest placing TRP, which was Teody. Not gonna lie, I thought this was based on boosted score, not raw score. And if that was the case, I would've won LSF. Please excuse me while I go bash my head into a metaphorical wall. And then S13 finale, made by the names H, gives you a list of items of H's mini-season that's modified to fit LSF's format, and then asks you to pick items that give you the highest chance of getting the tech. Now, this one isn't completely out of your control. You do have some agency in it, but getting the boost still depends on what the other finalists do. I tried playing it safe, making sure that 2 of mine would get it, since only 6 could get it in total. And I assumed both TR and Teody would get 2 each as well, but no. TR got 3 and Teody got 1. Oh come on Teody, I could have gotten second! Speaking of A tier. Finally we're at the decks which I think you should just go for every time. They aren't completely free and will alter your response, but the effect is so small that it's barely noticeable. This is the largest tier by far, so strap in. Admittedly, Adamanti 1 is kind of an outlier in this tier, because it won't actually mess up your response at all, but what it will mess up is your workflow and sanity from having to remember to ping Adam every 30 minutes. Thankfully, I feel like after voting came out, everyone who wanted the deck already got it, so I was able to slip in my pings. Infinite Threat even pinged me instead of Adam when I missed the timing like an idiot. How nice of you. This deck is so iconic that TR put it into Epsilon's Double Trouble as well. But I was a murderer that time, so Very and Snivy blocked me from completing it several times because I suck. It's the European ping, I swear. I don't know if Leah's asteroid belt is actually gonna happen, but it would be funny if Adam would just get pinged from now on until forever thanks to it. So far we've had techs at level 1 rank high simply because they were at level 1, even if they were hard to get. Thankfully B1 is both at level 1 and easy to get. Just like how you can still make normal sounding responses with B2, B1 allows you to do that and be slightly more verbose. Fred 1 was a little difficult to get in round 2, but with the addition of so many new techs in round 3, I think it's in a sweet spot right now. It forces you to do some techs that mess up your response a bit more than you'd like, but overall it's still easy to get, and forcing everyone to engage with a twist is always fun. You'll probably get I1 without even trying, not much more to say. I originally thought M1 was kinda difficult, because it looks so easy, meaning everyone was gonna include an emoji, weakening the boost. And it makes text like O2 and V1 difficult, unless you don't put a space between the word and the emoji, which is usually seen as bad practice. But then I saw Mindflex put the small black square emoji at the end of his round 2 response to serve as a punctuation mark. And then I completely stole his idea. No shame. Thanks man. L1 was a technical that I began with every time, working out the rest of the response with the baseline that it set. Jalapeno, Quetzal, Casino. I think it's also the reason why so many responses included logograms. It's also the only tech in the L group, so you're gonna want it every time. P1 and P2 are up here because most basic responses don't use more than 3 punctuation marks. At most you'll see like a period after the first sentence, a comma in the second sentence, and then an exclamation mark to end it off. And of course, if nobody uses an exclamation mark, then you'll blend right in. Yeah, the boost will be small, but don't look a gift Trojan in the mouth. S1 is quite fun. A lot of words rhyme with each other in some way, so even if it isn't a complete rhyme, it'll be given the okay. A small edit and you'll be here to stay. Tonya 2 seems difficult on the surface, but you don't actually need to keep saying Neonic for 2 hours. As long as you say it intermittently, with some occasional intervals, then that works. The only bad side is that you'll sound like a mad person, but we're playing TWOW, so that's not anything new. V1 is another one of those texts that you don't really need to try to get. Just don't use articles, which you weren't doing anyway because of X4. X4, like I just said, it also flows naturally into X5. X5, like I just said. Also, most words that are in the top 1000 have synonyms you can use instead. There's not much to say about Arnoob 1 Round 1. I was thinking about Splatoon when I made it, and thought it would be funny to see Booyah in every comic. And yeah, it kinda was. But since it's just one word, it's also just easy to fit in anywhere. Same thing goes for Arnoob 2 Round 1. Just take one of the aliases and plop them into the plot. I can say the same thing about Cyclo 1 Round 1 as S1, but this time the amount of room you've got is a ton. Just put the rhyme somewhere and you're done. DTTB 1 Round 1 decided who was going to appear in the comic alongside Arnoob 2, but it's similarly easy to complete. Most people you'd want to include because they're in some way connected to LSF already have the notable host role. Meowie 2 Round 1 is pretty easy to do considering that most comics have some kind of dramatic reveal in the second panel in order to set up the joke in the third panel, and a solid background perfectly captures the drama already. I did it, Cyclo did it, Theory did it, and Meowie did it in the last panel instead. TR and DTDB were smarter than the rest of us though, since they figured out you can have multiple solid colors. Pikaman 1 Round 1, ignoring the fact that it ruined my chances of passing Cyclo 2, is pretty easy because you can just avoid all 5-letter words with synonyms. Even then, many 5-letter words you might want to use are present on the list. I find it funny how Cyclo 2 and Pikaman 1 are the exact opposite in terms of completion. TR2 Round 1 is a great concept that I wish extended into the other rounds so that people weren't able to create nano geese. Long story. Theory and I failed this tech by loopholing Snivy 2 as I mentioned, but whatever. It's still easy to complete as long as you don't fly too close to the Leopard Sun. TR3 Round 1 is kind of just a more specific DDDB one, because if you're gonna include Leah or an LSF contestant, then you might as well pick one who's a notable host. DTTB 1 Round 2, alongside Arnoob 1, is responsible for making all of the Round 2 comics so crowded and chaotic. But in the end, everyone was able to shove a bunch of different characters into a small space. It would have been pretty cool if anyone did a monolith though. iTheory2 Round 2 would be pretty difficult, if not for the two technicals I just mentioned exponentially increasing the amount of characters present in the comic. It makes it pretty easy to just hide a copy of another book in the crowd. Arnoob 1 Round 3 was written before I really took a good look at the prompt, so I think I accidentally made it a bit too easy. Because doing something evil is literally what the prompt is asking you to do, so it makes sense that everyone did it besides the two fillers. I really like how people approached Cyclo 1 Round 3, because almost everyone who passed it did it in the exact same way. Key Smash. It has really good synergy with text like Meowie 2, since you can easily add the letters you need for the pangram in the Key Smash. And also with DTTB 1, because a dead character is usually in excruciating pain. Perfect for a Key Smash. Cyclo 2 Round 3 was one of two texts which everyone did that round, though I wouldn't immediately put it in S, because while I was looking at which panels I could reuse to pass TR1, some that I wanted to use had backgrounds with sunlight. I'm very lucky that DTDB did not just put a small yellow circle on the blue background here, because then I would have been toast. It's also probably the reason why TR's comic looked so flat. It was the only way to prevent sunlight. DTTB 1 Round 3 is the other tech this round that everyone did. Just like Arnoob 1, it fits the prompt, and those two also have great synergy with each other. And everyone also went with very unique causes of death. Let's list them all. Fire, falling, crucifixion, old age, asbestos poisoning, cannibalism, heat stroke, and all of the above. Meowie 2 Round 3 isn't too difficult because you get multiple slides to make the pangram with. So either you can make one character talk a lot in order to get every letter, or as I said before, just use the Key Smash. Pikaman 1 Round 3 takes what X4 tried to do, but applies it to comics, which is a lot harder because comics require dialogue, and so articles and I are a lot more useful. Thankfully, if you do use them, the tech does provide a way out in the funniest way possible, so I'd say there's no reason to not give it a shot. Okay, listen, I genuinely thought that everyone was going to opt into TR3 Round 3, so to only have it be DTDB and I instead made me a little worried, not gonna lie. It's also pretty funny that both TR and I went for text that cause inverted colors, but that only came to fruition in my comic, where it looks like the two characters actually swapped. In the end, I think DTDB and I had the last laugh, because while I'd understand not going for this one in one of the earlier rounds, I think it's so worth it in the last round because of the large 8% boost. F2 Finale, made by iTheory, is like Avocado 1 in that you have a list of words, one of which you must put in your response, but these words can be used in a lot more diverse contexts in my opinion, making it pretty simple to include one of them. C9 Finale, made by Didi, is one of the reasons why I chose to make one of my responses a completely normal one that doesn't really go for text, besides wanting the raw score badge. I get to think less about which text to include and still be rewarded for it. Apparently I'm the only one who thought that way, but yeah, I think it works. C11 Finale, made by Fred, made it easier to narrow down which responses belong to who, because they'd have to reuse a word. That's what I would have said if I didn't guess like ass. But completing it is no trouble, especially since you can reuse words like sandy or orange, which allow you to pass other text a second time. C13 Finale, made by Mr. Dell, could have been incredibly bad for us since across our three names we're missing crucial letters like M, U, S, or H. But thankfully, Leah rolled W instead. And that's a big W for all of us, since that letter doesn't come up very often. C16 finale, made by Nova, plays into a Trower's natural urge to make every noun plural to avoid articles. That's a good way to get a lot of words that end with the letter S. It also goes perfectly with Joachim's deck. S6 finale, made by Leah's aunt, is only not an S tier because it's mutually exclusive with Bubble Chomps' deck, but besides that, you're gonna want to use a word above 10 letters either way for verbosity's sake. And finally, S15 finale, made by Yonelius, might have been hard if the character limit or word limit was reduced, but since you have 15 words to work with and no character limit unless you do MGR stack, you're bound to gyat this deck, because there's enough room to get all 5 of the letters you need. And at last, we've made it to S tier. These are the technicals that are literal freebies. They do not alter your response in the slightest and are usually easy to get. For phase 1, that means these are mostly external technicals. Don't ask an LSF contestant what happened on the 8th of December 2023. It wasn't pretty. It was a battlefield full of landmines, switch traps, and Rube Goldberg contraptions, all to make one unfortunate Joachim fall for the fabled "these nuts" joke. The PTSD we received was immense, but so was the boost we got from Another Joke 1. Though let's just say we had to sacrifice our souls and dignity. I'm still waiting for Mindflex to DM me back. Clover 2 had the possibility of being pretty difficult. Some people went through some rigorous stuff in order to get their hands on a cookie. Thankfully, nepotism was always an option. Just super vote in Pepsi Tar Season 5. Easy. Mindflex 1 would have probably ended up lower if it got patched, but since it was a round 3 edition, it never got the opportunity to be. I loopholed it with fucking Mario Maker 2. Don't try me. Meowie 2 actually predicted what phase 5 is going to look like. How clairvoyant. Also, I realized that I never actually shared my art, so here it is. Seeing what other people made, I probably was not supposed to put actual effort into it. As usual, you'll likely stumble across phase 1 without putting any effort into it. Thankfully, Fred dropping the 20,000 most common English words in the server immediately didn't matter because it doesn't register in Discord's search function. Random 1. I couldn't say it better than Tenel. I'm just amazed people actually talk to the alts. I have nothing to say. It's all business. Random 2 is actually pretty difficult, but you can retry over and over again until you get it. But if you're doing this alongside Arnoop 1, then good luck. You only have 24 attempts to do it, excluding every hour in which you're unable to make any attempts. Have fun! S3 is the only phase 1 tag up here that wasn't submitted by a player, and that's because referencing a song is extremely simple. Just look up one of the words in your response on Spotify, and then pretend like your response was based off of it all along. So what if you're lying? Jimmy won't be able to take you to court over it. I'm completely biased towards TR1 because when this tech was released, I was already participating in Endless TWOW every single day. Hell, I'd say Endless TWOW was an important part of me learning how to do good at TWOW. Thanks, Woo Woo, you're a real one. DTTP2 round 1. Literally just take the trans flag and put it anywhere you want. I made Arnoop 1 round 2 in the hopes that it would be incredibly chaotic, and it actually was. However, DTTP completely annihilated it by arguing that each individual white pixel counts as a separate image. Shit. Cyclo 3 round 2 is one I thought was going to be fairly difficult, and I thought camouflaging the goose in Mark's tie was a genius idea. But do you know the lengths these people are willing to go through to hide the goose? 100 geese who are all not the goose Leah is looking for, using my likeness and a text box to perfectly camouflage the goose. 2 fucking nano geese? Are you fucking kidding me? DTTP 2 round 2 is easy because I just put a sign saying sponsored by NordVPN and that worked. Woohoo. I like how Pika and TR had the exact same idea of putting the logo in the text box. Meowie 1 round 2 took the issue of everyone's comics potentially being too recognizable in round 2 after already having seen each of them in round 1 and decided, nope, we're all using Times New Roman. I mean, yeah, sure, fine by me. Meowie 2 round 2 is also here, cause I mean, you're telling me I get to do less and still be rewarded for it? Oh hell yeah, bye bye Pika, I don't need your text. TR2 round 2 is the closest thing to a phase 1 external technical, and like most of those, this one is also completely free. Making another comic is something that doesn't mess with the comic that actually matters at all, so there's no reason not to do it. Arnoop 2 round 3 provides the daunting task of knowing how to compress files. Yeah, scary. DTTP 2 round 3 is just like TR2 round 2, in that it's something external that doesn't affect your comic whatsoever. I got to write 2 separate essays for LSF and Epsilon Season 6, so that was pretty fun. ITOD 1 round 3 looks like it'll mess up your comic a lot, but it's really not that bad. As long as you don't make your text too small, you can still easily tell what's going on. Meowie 1 round 3 is another tech that requires specific characters like ITOD 2, but much easier because you're still allowed to have other characters besides them, and because there are a lot more well-known options. Pikaman 2 round 3 could have been pretty hard, but Leah did a little bit of trolling and took it very literally. So instead of having to pass text from the previous 2 rounds, you had to pass text from round 1 and round 2. I've already listed many of them that are complete freebies, but since Meowie 2 wants you to form a pangram anyway, you might as well pick up the 3 texts that want you to have many letters. Then that only leaves one more to go, and personally I went with mentioning an LSF contestant. H1 Finale, made by Leah, has you writing a sob story about how much you loved LSF, but the maximum character count is 2000. I couldn't submit the script for this video because it went slightly over the maximum character count, just a little bit. F1 Finale, made by this loser, basically does Leah's job for her by explaining how LSF connects to Leah's other trials. Exciting stuff for the Leopard Sun cinematic universe. C1 Finale, made by 4Dice, requests you to put a check train in your Booksona. Fun fact, the trains are actually scaled 1-to-1 with our Booksonas. Normal Ben wishes he could reach this size. C3 Finale, made by Artie. Thank you for your mercy, we have been spared from potential disaster. Oh god, let's move on before the PTSD kicks in. C10 Finale, made by TTTB, is... hold on, let me get the clip. Trans rights, baby, woo! Wow, I sound like that? C12 Finale, made by Meowie, is great because it prevents the ever-prevalent pessimism strat. Science has proven that not being confident in your own response correlates with high scores. Don't fact-check that. C17 Finale, made by Pepsi, was funnily enough automatically passed by TR due to already having copied Leah's book, and thus Pepsi forced him to add another pair of wings, becoming a dragonfly in the process. Oh yeah, and I put them on that thing, I guess. C23 Finale, made by Tonya, like several others before it, once again inspires people to unleash their artistic potential. This is the most hideous thing I have ever created with my own 11 fingers. C25 Finale, made by Very Gold, is finally a finale tech up an S tier that you can't just get without even trying. But considering that Yodi already gave you a list of words that people are definitely going to use, and the fact that the word aliens is probably gonna get used because it's what the prompt revolves around, kinda negates the challenge of this tech. S8 Finale, made by Marisa, lets you submit a Bible verse alongside your response, but as far as I know, the Bible verse doesn't have to be related to the response. I submitted some that were related anyway, but you can just as easily give each response 2 Corinthians 6:8. S10 Finale, made by Nihonium, has somehow forever cemented TR and myself on the Gomi 500 leaderboard. This is the kind of stuff LSF does to you. When I first looked at this game, I had no idea what was going on, but over time I kinda came to appreciate it, due to learning the ins and outs of each achievement you were supposed to get for the speedrun. That was pretty fun. S12 Finale, made by Rek, demands that you put the letter A in your response. The journey to fulfill it was long and arduous. Years of my life I have devoted to overcoming this massive hurdle, and it has made me bigger, faster, and stronger too. And finally, S14 Finale, made by Void. It's the only tech that affects your comic rather than any of your normal responses, so only having to do one thing for that made it pretty easy, especially since I just made it a small reference in the top left corner. So all of those techs were complete freebies. But what if you not only wanted to get a boost by doing barely anything, but also wanted to conflict pain and suffering onto others? Well, not to worry, I've saved the best for last. Oh, you thought I wasn't going to be narcissistic after putting my first tech in C? Stay on your toes, buckaroo. Arnoop 2 is a cut above the rest, because due to the video format, Leah has to read all the confessionals out loud, artificially extending it just because it would be funny. And like, I only said submit a confessional. I didn't even tell these people to submit all of that. They did that of their own volition. Oh, how much we love devious chicanery around these parts. You all got the memo. And that's all, thank you for watching. I recorded most of this before the LSF finale, and since then I've noticed some other stuff that I could maybe mention. The LSF Technical Cabal, first started by Pepsi, TR, Adamanti, and Fred, worked together to clear some text in ways I didn't know about when I first started recording. For Tonya 1, the Chef Showdown tech, you only need to have an already recorded game to pass it, since it never specifies that you have to be a player in the game. TR gave his completion video to the rest of the gang, and that's how they were also able to get it. For Clover 1, sending a bunch of DMs to PepsiBot, you can just use a macro. So there I was talking about the indomitable human spirit when in reality it was machines doing the work. Nice. There's probably a bunch of other stuff I'm missing, but oh well. You can make your own tier list with the template in the description if you want to. Alright, with that over with, thank you again to everyone who was involved in LSF, and remember to join Leah's Shop of Horrors if you are able to. It will be so epic. Now, time to get started on ranking the technicals in Chimera Trial. Maybe in the next 100 years or so.